than having her fluffing around in my kitchen. You know, Sheila, makes such heavy weather of everything. Only yourself to blame then, Annie. Good old Hilda. You always knew you'd get a straight opinion from her and no flannel. Anne smiled as her feet took her upstairs, pretending to herself that all she was doing was bed-making. Anne and Hilda had been friends for years, ever since they started together at Cadbury's when they were 14. They'd worked side by side in their white overalls and caps in the filling room, over trays of chocolate shells. And since they'd left work, many cups of tea had been drunk together while looking after small children, and as they all grew up. There was nothing she couldn't say to Hilda. Well, almost nothing. And now, with the war on and men going off to the forces, Hilda was back working at Cadbury's, so she saw less of her these days anyway. On the landing, she looked in through the open bedroom doors. Even if it was hard work, it was nice having the whole family here under one roof again. There was Len's and her room, and Joy's next door, with all her fripperies on her dressing table, hairpins and makeup and ribbons, a pretty peach-coloured skirt flung on the bed. She loved getting dressed up, Joy did. Martin's room was quite different. Books, chessboard, his train set in a box, bits of Meccano. She smiled, though, at the sight of the little animal figures on his desk. Brother Rabbit, Percy Parrot, Freddy Frog. Happy that he still kept them there. Martin had been a keen member of the Cadbury's Club for Children, the Cocoa Cub Club, when he was young. He used to save to go on their trips and holidays, while the girls had not shown much interest. But the Cocoa Cub animals were given away with Bournville cocoa through much of the 30s, and they had bought a lot of cocoa in those days to collect Martin's animals for him. It had been quite hard to get hold of at times, with everyone so keen on the little toys. And now Sheila and Elaine were home and sleeping in the attic. Smiling at the thought of Elaine, the dear little poppet, Anne went to her own room. The walls were papered in a fawn colour, patterned with little nosegays of white flowers, and it was nice and bright in there now, with the blackout screens taken down and curtains pulled right back. She opened the window to let out the faint smell of sweat. Anne set about making up the bed with clean sheets, shaking out the blankets and turning back the dusty gold eiderdown. Len felt the heat in bed and was forever throwing the thing off onto the floor. She folded his pale green pyjamas under his pillow, her peach-coloured nightie under her own. Once she had tidied everything, she sank down on her side of the bed, rubbing her hands, which were red and sore from all the soap. Only then did she notice how shallow her breathing was. She was almost panting. She couldn't keep the thoughts out of her mind forever. War. Again. All these terrible things happening, in Poland, in Belgium and France. Now it looked as if they were going to be next to be invaded. Things had been quiet for a while. The phony war, they called it, after all the hoo-ha when they thought last autumn that they were going to be bombed any minute. Then nothing happened, not in this country, for months, until now. And now Sheila was back home, when she should really be with her husband, and these memories which came flooding in, now they had entered this, the second war of her life. Beside her was her chest of drawers. On the edge, within reach of the bed, were a bottle of aspirin, a screwed-up handkerchief and a glass of water, and resting on a long crocheted mat, her Mason Pearson hairbrush, a few hairpins beside a cherry-red lipstick, and the box of face powder with its pale pink puff in front of the folding triple mirror, which gave back the window's light to her room. Her face looked back at her, the soft wave of her brown hair round her forehead, her dark eyes that so many people had called pretty, her smooth complexion. There were a few threads of grey in her hair now, though. She was a middle-aged woman of 46, she reminded herself. A matron. Kicking off the worn old slippers she wore around the house, she stretched her toes on one of the rectangular flowered mats which covered the floorboards each side of the bed. It was suddenly so quiet. She let out a long breath. A faint ticking came from the living-room clock. Len and Joy were at Cadbury's, Martin at school, and Sheila had at last taken Elaine out in the pram for a bit. It felt a long time since she'd been alone, or that the house had been this peaceful. Almost as if it belonged to someone else, her hand reached out towards the top drawer.